Imagine waking up to find your bank account wiped clean, millions stolen in seconds, and the masterminds vanished without a trace. From shadowy hackers breaching the world's biggest banks to rogue insiders exploiting hidden vulnerabilities, these are the cyber heists that shocked the financial world. Sophisticated, unstoppable, and in some cases, never solved. How did they do it? And more importantly, could it happen to you? Stay with me, because these are the 5 most daring bank hacks where cyber criminals got away with it. The RBS WorldPay ATM Heist, 2008. In 2008, one of the most sophisticated cyber heists in banking history unfolded when hackers breached the systems of RBS WorldPay, the payment processing arm of the Royal Bank of Scotland. This attack resulted in the theft of $9 million in just 12 hours and demonstrated how cybercriminals could manipulate global financial systems to orchestrate a near-perfect crime. The heist was not just about stealing money, but about the precision, planning, and international coordination that made it one of the most notorious bank hacks in the United States. The attack began when a highly organized group of hackers infiltrated RBS WorldPay's network. Using advanced malware, they gained access to the bank's payment processing systems, which handled transactions for prepaid payroll and gift cards. Prepaid payroll cards were a lucrative target because they were issued to employees by companies and contained fixed withdrawal limits. However, the hackers found a way to bypass these restrictions, increasing the withdrawal limits to nearly unlimited amounts before duplicating the card data. Once the hackers had access to the card information, they encoded this stolen data onto counterfeit debit cards. These fake cards were then distributed to an extensive network of operatives across the globe, ready to withdraw money from ATMs on command. This group included individuals in over 49 cities worldwide, including New York, Atlanta, Moscow, Hong Kong, and several locations in Europe and South America. The operatives were essentially money mules who would conduct rapid, coordinated withdrawals from ATMs, ensuring that cash was stolen in a short time frame before authorities could react. On the night of the attack, the cybercriminals executed their plan with military precision. In a meticulously timed operation, they directed the money mules to withdraw funds simultaneously from various ATMs around the world. The withdrawals were carried out in small increments across thousands of transactions, avoiding automatic fraud detection mechanisms that banks and payment processors typically use. Within 12 hours, over 2,100 ATM transactions had been executed, draining $9 million from compromised accounts. What made this heist even more sophisticated was the hackers' ability to erase traces of their activity. After the money was withdrawn, they swiftly reset the withdrawal limits, making it appear as though nothing unusual had happened. This delay in detection allowed the attackers ample time to launder the stolen cash through various channels, making it nearly impossible for authorities to recover the funds. RBS WorldPay discovered the breach shortly after the fraudulent transactions began appearing in customer accounts. However, by the time the fraud was detected, the money was already gone and the network of money mules had dispersed. The FBI and U.S. Secret Service launched an extensive international investigation, which eventually led to the identification of the hacking group behind the operation. The core masterminds of the attack were linked to a cybercriminal syndicate operating out of Russia, which had previously been associated with other financial crimes and data breaches. In 2009, the U.S. government charged several individuals in connection with the heist. Among them was a Russian hacker named Viktor Pleshchuk, who was identified as one of the primary architects of the attack. He and his accomplices had used advanced techniques, including encryption and remote access tools, to penetrate RBS WorldPay's network. Pleshchuk was arrested in Russia, but due to the country's policies on extradition, he was never sent to the United States to face trial. Instead, he was prosecuted in Russia and sentenced to 6 years in prison. While some members of the cyber gang were arrested, The majority of the stolen money was never recovered. Many of the money mules disappeared without a trace, and others were never identified. The heist demonstrated how cybercriminals could exploit vulnerabilities in banking infrastructure and escape with millions, leaving financial institutions scrambling to reinforce their security measures. This attack led to significant changes in the way banks and financial institutions approached cybersecurity. RBS WorldPay, like many other payment processors, invested heavily in fraud detection systems and security protocols to prevent similar breaches in the future. The incident also highlighted the risks associated with prepaid debit card systems, leading to stricter regulations and enhanced monitoring of financial transactions. The RBS WorldPay ATM heist remains one of the most infamous cybercrimes in banking history. It showcased the vulnerabilities of financial institutions, the effectiveness of international cybercriminal networks, and the ongoing battle between hackers and security experts. While law enforcement agencies have since improved their ability to track and combat cyber threats, the techniques used in this attack continue to inspire new generations of hackers looking to exploit weaknesses in the digital financial ecosystem. Target and Chase data breach, 2013 to 2014. In late 2013, a massive cyber attack struck Target Corporation, one of the largest retail chains in the United States. This breach, which compromised the financial and personal data of millions of customers, later extended its impact to major banks, including JPMorgan Chase, as stolen card details were used to exploit various financial systems. The attack not only exposed vulnerabilities in retail cybersecurity, but also demonstrated how interconnected financial institutions were, making them susceptible to cascading cyber threats. The attack began with a sophisticated infiltration of Target's internal systems. Cybercriminals first gained access to the retailer's network by compromising a third-party HVAC vendor, which had remote access to Target's infrastructure for maintenance purposes. Using stolen credentials, the hackers infiltrated Target's network and deployed malware designed to scrape credit and debit card data from point-of-sale (POS) terminals in the company's stores across the United States. The malware remained undetected for weeks, quietly collecting payment card information from millions of transactions. By the time security teams identified the breach, the hackers had already exfiltrated data on approximately 40 million credit and debit card accounts, along with personal information such as names, addresses, and phone numbers of around 70 million customers. This data was quickly sold on the dark web, allowing other cybercriminals to exploit the stolen card details. As the stolen card data began circulating, banks across the U.S. noticed a surge in fraudulent transactions. JPMorgan Chase, one of the largest financial institutions affected, had issued millions of debit and credit cards that were now at risk. The bank had to take emergency measures, including reissuing over 2 million affected debit cards and placing enhanced fraud monitoring on compromised accounts. While Chase managed to limit some of the damages, the breach highlighted a severe flaw in how retailers and banks managed payment security. The consequences for Target were immediate and severe. The company faced massive financial losses due to fraud reimbursements, fines, and legal settlements. Additionally, consumer trust took a major hit, leading to decreased sales and a significant drop in stock value. In the aftermath, Target invested heavily in security upgrades, including implementing EMV chip-enabled payment terminals and strengthening its cybersecurity infrastructure. Law enforcement agencies, including the FBI and Secret Service, launched an investigation into the attack. It was eventually linked to a cybercriminal group operating out of Eastern Europe, with connections to underground hacking forums that specialized in selling stolen financial data. However, many of the key perpetrators behind the breach remained elusive, making it difficult for authorities to recover the stolen funds. The Target breach also had a long-term impact on banking regulations and security standards. it accelerated the adoption of chip and PIN technology in the United States, which had already been widely used in Europe. Additionally, banks and retailers began investing more in artificial intelligence-driven fraud detection systems to prevent similar attacks. Despite the lessons learned from the Target and Chase data breach, cybercriminals continued to evolve their tactics, targeting not just retail stores but also banks, government agencies, and other critical infrastructure. This incident remains one of the largest and most damaging retail breaches in U.S. history, underscoring the ongoing battle between cybersecurity experts and hackers seeking to exploit financial systems. JPMorgan Chase Hack, 2014. In 2014, JPMorgan Chase, the largest bank in the United States, suffered one of the most significant cyber attacks in banking history. The breach compromised data from over 76 million households and 7 million small businesses, exposing the vulnerabilities of even the most fortified financial institutions. While the hackers did not directly steal money from accounts, the breach provided them with a treasure trove of sensitive information that could be used for future financial fraud and identity theft. The incident demonstrated how cybercriminals could infiltrate the heart of the U.S. banking system and evade detection for months. The attack was orchestrated by a group of sophisticated hackers who exploited a weak point in JPMorgan Chase's security infrastructure. The breach began when cybercriminals gained access to an overlooked server that lacked two-factor authentication, an essential security measure that should have been in place for such a high-profile institution. Once inside the network, the hackers systematically escalated their privileges, moving deeper into Chase's systems and gaining access to critical customer data. The hackers maintained access for several months, undetected by Chase's security teams. During this time, they were able to extract vast amounts of information, including names, addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses of Chase customers. While no financial account numbers, Social Security numbers, or passwords were directly stolen, the breach provided enough information to carry out large-scale phishing attacks and other forms of financial fraud. One of the most concerning aspects of this hack was the scale and precision of the attack. The hackers successfully penetrated more than 90 servers within JPMorgan Chase's infrastructure, making it one of the most extensive intrusions into a U.S. bank's systems. The bank, which had invested hundreds of millions of dollars in cybersecurity, was caught off guard by the breach, highlighting how even the most secure institutions were vulnerable to sophisticated attacks. When Chase eventually detected the breach in mid-2014, it triggered an immediate crisis response. The bank hired top cybersecurity experts to investigate the attack, secure its systems, and assess the damage. In an effort to reassure customers, Chase issued public statements clarifying that no financial transactions had been compromised, though the potential for identity theft remained a serious concern. The bank also encouraged customers to be vigilant against phishing attempts and fraudulent activities that could arise from the stolen data. Law enforcement agencies, including the FBI and Secret Service, launched an international investigation to track down the perpetrators. After months of tracing digital footprints, authorities linked the attack to a group of cybercriminals operating out of Russia and Israel. The hackers were part of a larger financial crime syndicate that had also been involved in securities fraud, money laundering, and additional cyber heists targeting other financial institutions. In 2015, U.S. authorities indicted 4 individuals in connection with the JPMorgan Chase hack. One of the key figures behind the attack, Gary Shalon, was arrested in Israel and later extradited to the United States. Shalon and his accomplices were charged with orchestrating a massive cyber fraud operation that not only targeted Chase, but also other financial entities and stock trading platforms. They had allegedly used the stolen data to manipulate stock prices, run illegal online gambling operations, and launder money through offshore accounts. The breach had lasting repercussions for the financial sector. Chase, along with other major banks, significantly increased its cybersecurity spending in the wake of the attack. The incident also led to stricter cybersecurity regulations, with the U.S. government urging financial institutions to enhance their defenses against state-sponsored and organized cybercrime groups. Despite the arrests, some members of the hacking group remained at large, and much of the stolen data had already been disseminated across dark web marketplaces. The case served as a stark reminder of the evolving threats facing the financial industry and the need for constant vigilance in an era where cyber attacks had become as dangerous as traditional bank robberies. The JPMorgan Chase hack remains one of the largest financial breaches in history, not because of the money stolen, but because of the sheer scale of the attack and the potential damage it could have caused. It underscored the reality that no bank, no matter how well funded or prepared, was entirely immune to cyber threats. Capital One data breach, 2019. In 2019, Capital One of the largest banks in the United States, suffered a massive data breach that exposed the sensitive personal and financial information of more than 100 million customers and applicants. This attack was different from traditional cyber heists in that it was not orchestrated by a global criminal syndicate, but by a single rogue hacker, a former employee of Amazon Web Services, AWS, which hosted Capital One's cloud infrastructure. The breach demonstrated how insider knowledge and misconfigured security settings could lead to a devastating cyber attack, costing the company hundreds of millions in fines and damages. The attack was carried out by Paige Thompson, a former software engineer who had previously worked for AWS. Exploiting a vulnerability in Capital One's cloud storage configuration, Thompson was able to access customer data stored on Amazon servers. The breach went undetected for months, allowing the hacker to quietly download vast amounts of information without triggering any alarms. The stolen data included names, addresses, credit scores, phone numbers, and social security numbers of Capital One customers and credit card applicants. It affected approximately 100 million individuals in the U.S. and 6 million in Canada, making it one of the largest financial data breaches in history. While the hacker did not appear to have sold the data or used it for financial fraud, the exposure of such a large volume of sensitive information created a major security crisis for the bank. Unlike many cybercriminals who operate in secrecy, Thompson boasted about the breach online. She posted details of her hack on a public GitHub page and engaged in discussions about it on social media. This reckless behavior led to her swift arrest when a security researcher discovered the posts and alerted Capital One, who then contacted the FBI. Within days, federal agents tracked her down, raided her residence, and seized multiple terabytes of stolen data stored on her personal devices. The fallout from the breach was severe for Capital One. The company faced a class action lawsuit from affected customers and was later fined $80 million by U.S. regulators for failing to secure its cloud-based storage properly. The breach also cost Capital One over $300 million in remediation efforts, including cybersecurity upgrades, credit monitoring for affected customers, and legal fees. Beyond the immediate financial consequences, the breach raised serious concerns about cloud security. Capital One had been one of the leading adopters of cloud computing in the banking sector, relying heavily on AWS for its infrastructure. The incident exposed the risks associated with misconfigured cloud services, prompting other banks and financial institutions to reassess their own cloud security protocols. In 2022, Paige Thompson was convicted of wire fraud and unauthorized access to a protected computer. Prosecutors argued that her knowledge as a former AWS employee gave her an unfair advantage in exploiting security weaknesses. She was sentenced to time in prison, though she claimed that she never intended to profit from the stolen data. The Capital One breach remains one of the most significant cybersecurity failures in modern banking history. It illustrated how a single rogue hacker with insider knowledge could exploit misconfigurations in cloud infrastructure to access sensitive financial data. The case also served as a wake-up call for banks relying on cloud technology, emphasizing the need for stronger security measures, continuous monitoring, and stricter access controls to prevent future breaches. PNC Bank and Zelle fraud attacks, ongoing. In recent years, a wave of cyber fraud attacks has targeted PNC Bank and other major U.S. banks through the widely used Zelle payment system. Unlike traditional cyber heists that involve hacking into a bank's infrastructure, these attacks rely on social engineering, account takeovers, and real-time fraudulent transactions, allowing cybercriminals to drain victims' accounts before banks can respond. The attacks have caused millions of dollars in customer losses and exposed significant weaknesses in how banks handle real-time digital payments. The fraud scheme typically begins with phishing, vishing, voice phishing, or smishing, SMS phishing attacks, in which scammers impersonate bank representatives and trick victims into revealing sensitive account information. The criminals often call or text customers, claiming that their bank account has been compromised or that an urgent transaction needs verification. Posing as legitimate PNC bank agents, they convince unsuspecting victims to provide login credentials or approve fraudulent transactions. Once the fraudsters gain access to a victim's account, they quickly initiate large Zelle transfers, sending money to mule accounts that are difficult to trace. Because Zelle transactions are instant and irreversible, victims often realize they've been scammed too late to recover their funds. Unlike credit card fraud, where banks typically refund unauthorized transactions, many victims have found that PNC Bank and other institutions refuse to reimburse stolen funds, arguing that the customer authorized the payment, albeit under false pretenses. The rise of these attacks has sparked national outrage, with thousands of affected customers filing complaints against PNC Bank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Chase, demanding accountability for the lack of security measures. Many victims claim that banks have failed to implement sufficient fraud detection mechanisms and do not provide adequate warnings about Zelle-related scams. Some even report that fraudsters were able to bypass two-factor authentication, suggesting deeper vulnerabilities in the banking systems. Cybercriminals behind these fraud schemes often operate from overseas call centers linked to organized crime rings. These groups use sophisticated techniques, such as AI-generated voice calls and deepfake social engineering tactics, to increase their success rates. In some cases, they even spoof PNC Bank's official phone numbers, making it nearly impossible for victims to distinguish between real and fake calls. The issue has reached the attention of U.S. lawmakers and regulators, with calls for stronger consumer protection laws related to digital payment fraud. In response to mounting pressure, some banks, including PNC, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo, have begun implementing additional security measures, such as enhanced transaction monitoring, stricter verification processes, and AI-powered fraud detection systems. However, customer advocacy groups argue that these measures are not enough and that banks should be held responsible for reimbursing victims of sophisticated fraud schemes. As cybercriminals continue to evolve their tactics, the PNC Bank and Zelle fraud epidemic remains an ongoing financial security crisis in the U.S. banking industry. It highlights the vulnerabilities of real-time payment networks and raises urgent questions about how banks should balance convenience with security. Until stricter safeguards are implemented, millions of customers remain at risk of falling victim to one of the most persistent and damaging financial scams of the digital age.